Hi everyone, I'm Lindsay. I handle all your pastry production here at the Mississauga Golf and Country Club. And in Halloween spirit, we've decided to do a tutorial on how to do your own caramel apples at home. So stay tuned, there's lots of instructions, but I'll walk you through every step. All right, so the equipment you're gonna need today is first and foremost, it's a flat bottom, heavy bottom pot. One thing I'd like to mention is you really want to make sure your pot is super clean and free of any kind of contaminants. Because you're working with sugar, it's a little temperamental. So any kind of contaminant, it's just going to ruin your whole recipe. So wipe it down after you've cleaned it, make sure it's super dry. Nothing's in there, no dust, nothing. The next thing you're going to need is a paintbrush with a little bit of water. And I can explain it once we start making the recipe, but this is just going to clean the edges of your pot prior to your sugar coming to a boil. Next, you're going to need, doesn't have to be a liter container, just something that's tall and deep so that you can dip your apples. Even a measuring cup works as well. It's just kind of what you have at home. Spatula, it's always a need. You don't want to touch anything about this recipe. It's super hot. You are going to hurt yourself if you do. Keep that in mind if you're doing this with your kids at home. Next, wooden dowels. Probably the longer the better, again, especially if you're working with kids. Popsicle sticks work as well. Next, you're gonna need, this is a silt pat. It's a reusable mat you can put on trays. You can either use this, parchment paper, wax paper. You just want this to eliminate any kind of sticking onto your trays. It's very sticky. It will get everywhere. Last, but probably the most important thing you're gonna need is a candy thermometer. So sugar, like I said, it's very temperamental. We're gonna be boiling this recipe to a very certain degree. So you wanna have an accurate working candy thermometer. So you can pick these up at Walmart, Canadian Tire. They're super accessible. They're not very expensive. And you can use this for if you're deep frying at home as well. So it won't go to waste if you buy one. Our ingredients, we're using Granny Smith apples. This is actually a smaller Granny Smith apple that's standard in grocery stores. We get this from our produce supplier, which is AJ Lanzarada. If you guys want to check it out, it's open to the public. This is Granny Smith size number 113 to be specific. You really want to make sure you wash and dry these apples thoroughly before attempting this recipe, because that waxy coating that apples come with will prevent your caramel from sticking. Again, you can also use whatever apples you have a preference to. Granny Smith is generally the go-to because of that sour tart taste to them. It goes well with the rich heaviness of a caramel. Next, butter. You're gonna use a 1/4 cup of butter. You're gonna use 1 3/4 cup cream, heavy cream, 35%, 1/2 teaspoon of vanilla, 1/2 teaspoon of salt. I prefer kosher, gives a little bit more of a punch to the caramel recipe. And 2 cups of brown sugar. I'm using dark brown sugar, and I'm also using corn syrup, 1 cup of corn syrup. Now I'm using the darker of these two options. Either works. You can use light brown sugar. You can even use light corn syrup. I just prefer these because you're gonna get a richer taste and a darker finish for your caramel. Again, it's not gonna make a difference if you use light brown sugar. It's not gonna make a difference if you use light corn syrup. It's whatever you have or whatever you find first in the grocery store. So I like to push them all the way to the bottom. That way, when you're dipping, the weight of the caramel isn't gonna pull the apple out of the dowel. All right, so first step of the process is you're gonna add your cream into the pot. Just scrape everything down. Now with baking, you guys wanna be super accurate in terms of what you're putting into your pot, because within reason, everything's going to go wrong if things aren't fairly accurate. So that's your cream, your brown sugar, corn syrup, butter, and I'm gonna put the salt in now. The only thing you're leaving out of this recipe is the vanilla for now. Because vanilla is alcohol based, it will burn out through the process. You're gonna lose some of the flavor. So that's why you always add your vanilla after you've stopped your cooking process. So now that everything's in the pot, you're going to turn your stove top to medium to high heat and you can stir it until it comes to a boil, but after it comes to a boil, don't stir it any longer. So what I'm doing right now is I'm just mixing all our ingredients together. Like I said, it's okay to mix it until it comes to a boil, but once it comes to a boil, stop mixing. Now I'm going to explain to you why we have the paintbrush with a little bit of water. So as you guys can see, there's buildup from us mixing it. Now later on in the cooking process, this is what's going to possibly cause our sugar to crystallize. And I could explain to you what crystallizing sugar is, but trust me when I say you'll know it when it happens, if it happens. So to try to avoid that, you're just going to damp your paintbrush slightly. You're going to run it along the sides of your pot so that your quote unquote contaminant, which is really just your cream, is cleaned off the sides of your pot. And once you've done that, you're going to let it come to a boil. Like I said, you're on medium to high heat. This is going to take a while. It's probably about 15 to 20 minutes depending on how hot your stove goes, but just be patient. Once it comes to a boil, stick your candy thermometer in and just let it go until it comes to 115 degrees Celsius. This is your softball caramel stage. It's actually a couple degrees higher than your softball caramel stage. So once it comes to 115, you're going to take it off the heat and you're going to let it cool. But we'll show you kind of what you're looking for prior to taking it off the heat. Okay, so our candy thermometer is reading at about 113 degrees Celsius. That's what you're aiming for. You can go a couple seconds longer, but I'm gonna take it off because the heat's gonna carry over. You're gonna take your candy thermometer out. It's easiest to wash it while your caramel's hot. Clean, you're done. You're gonna let this sit because it's boiling, it's super hot. You're not gonna be able to coat anything anyways. So you're gonna let this sit for about 10-15 minutes. After 10-15 minutes, it's still gonna be super hot. So just be careful, but it'll be thick enough that you can start your dipping. Okay, welcome back. So it's been about 10-15 minutes since we took our caramel off the heat. As you can see, it's thickened up quite a bit, but it is still quite hot. So just mind your hands when handling it. So what you're gonna wanna do prior to each apple is just give the caramel a stir, because sometimes the fat in the caramel will crust over at the top. It's not gonna look very nice if you don't do it. Another thing to note is don't mix your caramel too much, because you're gonna incorporate a lot of air and those bubbles will show up on your apples. Again, it's an aesthetic thing. If you don't mind the air bubbles, it's not a big deal. So you're gonna take your apples from the fridge. They should be well chilled. You're gonna keep them in the fridge because it's gonna help your caramel set faster. You're gonna dip it into your container, let it coat all the way up, pull it out slowly, and you can just give it a twist. This is gonna shake off all the excess. Now, depending on how thick of a coat you want on your apple, you can do a double coat. So what you're gonna do if you wanted to double coat it is you're gonna wait until the caramel kind of slows down in terms of its drip, just so it sets a little bit. I even like to wipe the excess off the bottom, and then I'll come back to that after I've dipped another apple. So I'm just gonna give it just a little stir, and then I'm gonna come back in with a second apple. Now this is the process that's gonna be the messiest, so just be aware. As you can see, it starts to dribble down the side a little bit. Just be cautious of that in your environment in case you don't want a huge mess to clean up. So just give it a shake. If you've stuck your dowel down far enough through the apple, you shouldn't have an issue of it falling off. So I'm gonna go back in for a double dip on our first apple. You can grab something to lift it off your mat. No one's gonna see the bottom anyways, and go in for your double dip. Now, if you guys wanted to decorate your apples, again, just let your caramel drip quite a bit. You want it to set enough that it's not gonna make a huge mess once you start adding your decoration, but you also want it to be warm enough that it's gonna stick to your caramel, because if you wait too long, you're literally gonna have to hand press it into your caramel and it's not gonna stick as well. So I have Halloween sprinkles and toasted coconut here. You can use nuts, you can use M&Ms, whatever kind of floats your boat. So you can just dip your bottoms in there. This is also a good way to hide your ugly bottoms if you have one. And it adds a little bit of extra flair. Now, obviously it may not get enough along the bottom, so you can also just take your hand along the side. It's not so hot now at this point that you're gonna hurt yourself. Just be cautious. Okay everyone, so that's our caramel apples. You can store these in your fridge loosely wrapped. I would recommend keeping them in your fridge. I only say that because I left them in the kitchen overnight at room temperature and it's quite warm in there, so they will melt. So learn from my mistake, keep them in the fridge. They will last for probably a few days, but they're probably best served immediately, if not maybe within the hour. So even within less than 10 minutes of us dipping these, they're set. It's a nice soft caramel, so you're not going to break your teeth eating it either. I hope you guys enjoy this video. This is my debut to our Instagram page, so if you want to follow me and what I'm doing here at the club or any baking I do outside of the club, you can follow me on Instagram at Need to Know, and hope to see you guys soon for our next video. Thanks so much.